Today I'm joined with Jennifer Smith-Merry, Associate Professor at the University of Sydney and Director of the Centre for Disability Research and Policy. Thanks so much for joining us today. Now, for those who may not know about the complexities of applying for NDIS and NDIS funding for a mental illness, can you tell us a little bit about that and why the NDIS uses a term psychosocial disability when looking at mental illness?
Well, psychosocial disability is the term that the NDIS uses for people with mental health conditions that are disabling. So they're mental health conditions that are stopping them from living their lives in a meaningful way. So we know that mental illness you can have mild to moderate to severe types of mental illness, and that it can be something that stops you from living your life. So for people where their mental illness, they're unable to do the things that they want to do in their life. So they're being socially marginalized. They're not able to participate in work, their communities, and education. Then the NDIS will offer them supports in order to be able to participate in society. I think that it is a challenge to have people with psychosocial disability in the NDIS. Now, the reason is because the NDIS is, well, originally when it was set up, it actually didn't even conceptualize mental illness as being part of the scheme. And so mental illness came to the scheme as a bit of a sort of a later add-on. And the NDIS Act, which governs the whole of the operation of the NDIS. So it's a federal legislation that's then enacted in all the different states. It has a criteria for participants who can enter the NDIS of permanence, which is not unusual. So you have to have a permanent disability. That's not unusual. We have it in other types of legislation, such as the legislation governing access to social security and particularly the disability pension. But what is unusual is, unlike the disability pension related legislation, permanence under the NDIS Act is about lifelong disability. So basically, when you are saying that you want to be eligible to the NDIS, you're saying that you are going to have a disability for life. Now, we know that for most people who experience even very severe mental illness, they will go on to have periods of their lives and even the rest of their life without that mental illness. So more than 60% of people who are diagnosed with psychosis, for example, will no longer then go on to have that diagnosis at some point in the future. And our mental health legislation generally is set up around this idea of recovery, that you can have a meaningful life with or without the symptoms of mental illness. So you may have a very significant episode of psychosis, but then we have an expectation of recovery. And that is something that's enshrined in all of our mental health policy in Australia. But the NDIS is different, because you're saying then, basically, if you've got a psychosocial disability and you want to access the NDIS, you're basically denying that recovery is possible. You're saying, no, I will have this for the rest of my life. And yeah, as I said before, to get on the disability pension, their permanence criteria is only 2 years. So you will only have something for 2 years. So it's a very restrictive definition of disability.
So I would imagine that could be quite a damaging definition. Is that quite damaging for those who may be applying for the NDIS because of already a mental illness?
It is quite problematic, because we know that a lot of the we know that there is that mental illness is highly stigmatized, and that a lot of people just having a definition of having a diagnosis of mental illness can cause further mental health problems and indeed suicide risk, because people will think, I am feeling this terrible thing at the moment, and I am going to have that for the rest of my life. It is much better to have a policy and service system where where the idea is that you will go on to have a meaningful life. Sure, you have mental illness at the moment and you can get support for it, but in the future, this is not something that you're going to generally have to deal with for the rest of your life. So it is personally damaging, and it adds to the stigma of mental illness, where people are sort of stamped as having mental illness. We know it's a highly stigmatized illness. It's, you know, there's all these connotations of danger and sort of hopelessness that are attached to it. So yeah, having to say that you will have something for your whole life that is quite stigmatizing is very problematic.
Do you know what the statistics are for the amount of people who are on the NDIS under that psychosocial disability?
Well, it's meant to be around 10% of the NDIS participant group is meant to have psychosocial disability, but we actually know that that does not, so that would not cover the number of people in Australia with severe psychosocial disability. It falls way short of that number. So there is a significant problem around access to the NDIS for that group, and that's for a number of reasons. But the big implication of it is that there have been important programs that the government has run, such as Partners in Recovery, and programs like that were directly targeting people with psychosocial disability. And those programs have been closed, and that's because that money has been rolled into funding the NDIS. So there's other programs that have happened, such as the continuation of support programs, but that not everyone has gone into that. And we have seen that not everyone with severe and complex mental illness has gone into the NDIS. So therefore, there's been a shortfall in care for those people. And I mean, I was talking about it before, but one of the reasons around that is that people with psychosocial disability often find it difficult to gather the evidence that they need to be able to prove permanent disability to enter the scheme. So therefore, that criteria of permanence comes up again as a significant barrier to people actually entering the NDIS scheme.
So would you agree that whilst the NDIS is life-changing in theory, in practice, it is quite flawed and could use some serious reformation?
Exactly. And I think that it's particularly, I think that where the NDIS needs the most work is for people with severe and complex needs. So people with complex needs, because the NDIS is set up around this idea of choice and control. Where an individual has their own budget, personal budget, and they're able to buy in services. That works for people who are able to do that and for people who have support to do that. And it also works for people who have fairly straightforward needs, in that services can provide those needs fairly easily. But if you have someone who has a complex situation such as homelessness or drug and alcohol problems, or has, because of the nature of their disability, has behavioural problems that make care more tricky, then those people are getting less of a service, because service providers, they have to pay more money for their staff to be able to have the skills to be able to support those people. So there are less services actually out there. So that's where a market model, which is what the NDIS is predicated on, that there is a disability care market out there, sort of falls short as a policy. Because if the services are expensive to run, then the services won't provide them, because it's not going to be financially viable for them as a business.
Thanks for your time today. If you want to learn more about psychosocial disabilities, how to apply for the NDIS, or any other information on disability care and support, you can visit us at our website www.mycarechannel.org.au, or simply give us a call. You can call us on 1300 46 1300.
Do you sometimes feel you need help, but that finding the right help is just too hard? At MyCare Channel, we'll make it easier. We'll cut through the maze of information and help you make an informed decision about help for yourself or your loved one. We offer free information in English and progressively in 26 other languages. So call us on 1300 461 300, subscribe to our channel and follow us on our socials, and we'll connect you with the support you need to live well and age well.